Love Story. Lily Adams stepped onto the platform, the cool morning air brushing against her cheeks as she adjusted the strap of her bag. The train station buzzed with the familiar rhythm of early commuters, each lost in their own world, their steps synchronized in a hurried march towards the day ahead. She found her usual seat by the window, the one that gave her the best view of the city waking up. As the train started moving, Lily opened her sketchbook, allowing her pencil to glide across the page. Today, she was sketching the silhouette of the old oak tree that stood proudly in the park, its branches reaching out like arms trying to embrace the sky. It was a scene she had drawn many times before, but today it felt different, as if something was missing. Her thoughts drifted, as they often did on these rides. The train was a constant in her life, the one part of her day that remained untouched by the chaos of deadlines and the aftermath of a broken relationship. Yet, in the monotony of it all, there was a quiet yearning, a sense that life was happening somewhere beyond the glass, just out of reach. At the next stop, the doors slid open and he stepped in. She noticed him immediately, as she had the past few days. He was hard to miss, tall, with a relaxed confidence that seemed to radiate from him. He wore a leather jacket, a camera bag slung casually over his shoulder, and when their eyes met, he smiled. It was the kind of smile that was both polite and warm, the kind that made you want to smile back. Lily quickly averted her gaze, her heart giving a small, unexpected flutter. She pretended to focus on her sketch, but the lines on the page blurred as she felt his presence across the aisle. They were strangers, after all, just two people who happened to take the same train every morning. But as the train sped towards the city, she couldn't help but wonder, what if they weren't? The train was quieter than usual, the usual rush of morning commuters replaced by a softer hum of conversation. Lily felt a flutter of nervous excitement as she took her seat, her eyes scanning the car for a familiar face. She didn't have to wait long. Dan stepped in a few moments later, his usual easy smile lighting up the car. This time, instead of just exchanging glances, he walked over and sat in the seat next to her. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, his voice warm and casual. "Not at all," Lily replied, tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. She felt the heat rise to her cheeks, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "I've noticed you're always sketching," Dan said, nodding towards her open sketchbook. "You're really talented. Do you do this professionally?" Lily laughed softly. "Thank you. No, it's just a hobby. Something to pass the time on these long rides." She glanced at his camera bag. "What about you? I've seen you with that camera. Are you a photographer?" "Sort of," Dan said, a hint of modesty in his tone. "I'm a travel writer. I take photos for my articles. It's a bit of a wandering life, but I love it." They continued to chat, the conversation flowing easily, like a river finding its course. Lily found herself opening more than she expected, sharing stories about her favorite spots in the city, her passion for art, and even a bit about her recent heartbreak. Dan listened with genuine interest, occasionally sharing a story of his own, a funny anecdote from his travels, or a piece of wisdom learned on the road. Days turned into weeks, and our daily conversations became the highlight of Lily's mornings. She started to arrive at the station a bit earlier, just to make sure she didn't miss the train they always seemed to share. Dan, too, found himself adjusting his schedule, eager to see her smile as she looked up from her sketchbook to greet him. But then, one morning, he wasn't there. Lily felt a pang of disappointment as she sat in her usual spot, her eyes glancing towards the door each time it slid open, hoping to see his familiar face. By the end of the week, with no sign of him, she started to wonder if she'd imagined the whole connection. Maybe he'd just found a new train, a new routine, a new someone. When he finally returned, it was with an apology and an explanation. He'd been called away on a last-minute assignment, and though the trip had been short, it had been long enough for him to realize how much he missed their morning chats. But as much as he was drawn to her, there was a part of him that was afraid of what it would mean to stay, to settle, to commit to something more than just fleeting moments on a train. The train lurched to a sudden stop, jostling the passengers as the lights flickered. Lily looked up from her sketchbook, her heart skipping a beat. Outside, the world had come to a standstill. The train halted on the tracks with no station in sight. Murmurs of confusion spread through the car as the conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a delay due to a technical issue. Dan turned to her, a playful smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Looks like we are stuck here for a while. Guess it's just you, me, and your sketchbook." Lily laughed softly, though inside her nerves danced. "I suppose we'll have to make the best of it," she said, closing the sketchbook and setting it aside. "So, tell me more about your travels. What's the most interesting place you've been to?" Dan's eyes lit up as he began to recount a story about his time in a remote village in Nepal, the conversation flowing easily between them. But soon the light-hearted stories gave way to something deeper. The confined space, the unusual circumstance, it all seemed to strip away their usual reservations. "You know," Lily began, her voice quieter now, "I've been meaning to tell you. I'm glad we met. I've been so caught up in my own world that I didn't realize how much I needed someone to talk to. But at the same time, I'm scared. I've been hurt before, and it's hard to imagine going through that again." Dan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I get it. I've spent so much time running from place to place, never staying long enough to get attached. I thought that was the best way to live. No strings, no commitments. But then I met you, and suddenly I started looking forward to something other than my next trip. It's scary, but maybe that's a good thing." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Then Dan reached out, his hand covering hers. "Maybe we don't have to figure everything out right now. Maybe we just take it one step at a time, see where it goes." Lily looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She squeezed his hand, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'd like that," she whispered. The train jolted back to life, the lights brightening as the engine roared back into action. But something had shifted in the car, something intangible yet undeniable. As the train pulled into the station, Lily and Dan stood together, their hands still linked. "How about we start with lunch?" Dan suggested as they stepped onto the platform. Lily grinned, feeling lighter than she had in months. "Lunch sounds perfect." They walked out of the station side by side, the noise of the city swelling around them. For the first time, the future felt open, full of possibilities. Whatever happened next, they would face it together.